America, the land of opportunity, one of the most innovative and progressive nations in the world.
But my poor little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character.
And with the United States 2020 presidential election fast approaching, America is once again leading the forefront by bringing to light many issues that are plaguing not only the country, but the world.
Let me start on housing. Many of you know that we have a black-white wealth gap in America, and we've had it since we first started measuring by race back in the 1940s.
It's this choice that we have in every moment of our lives. It's either to accept things as they are or take responsibility for changing it.
And we must stop the glorification of violence in our society. This includes the gruesome and grisly video games that are now commonplace.
However, there is one topic that seems to grow more and more relevant as time passes, especially as the global warming crisis becomes increasingly more apparent, and that topic is nuclear energy. In order to better understand nuclear energy, it is important to be familiar with how it actually first came into use.
Our understanding of nuclear started in the late 1800s when radioactivity was discovered, primarily by the work of Marie and Pierre Curie. They were just playing around with it, seeing what does it do. It wasn't until World War II, when we had the atom bomb, people started looking at it and saying, wow, could we use this for something other than blowing stuff up? And that's when they wanted to convert the power that you get out of a nuclear explosion from being destruction to can we harness that and use it to create energy for us.
What followed was a massive effort into researching and developing nuclear energy. By the mid to late 20th century, several power plants had been built and many more were being constructed throughout the world. However, people began to question the implications surrounding nuclear.
The reality is that there were protests and people were concerned. There's a saying called "not in my backyard," shortened out NIMBY. It doesn't matter if it's a nuclear power plant, a coal-burning power plant. It doesn't matter actually if it's just a big old landfill. We don't want it near us. Part of that is fear. And part of that is not understanding, and part of that is we don't want to have to look at it.
Throughout the following years, 3 nuclear accidents caused the nuclear energy debate to escalate drastically. First, there was the 3 Mile Island accident, which occurred in Pennsylvania and involved a partial reactor meltdown and radioactive materials leaking out into the nearby surroundings. Next up was the Chernobyl disaster in the Soviet Union. An explosion occurred in a reactor which ended up sending tons of radioactive particles into the atmosphere, making the nearby city of Pripyat inhospitable and killing several people in the process. Today, this is considered the worst nuclear disaster in history. Lastly, the Fukushima disaster occurred in Japan in 2011. It was caused by a tsunami hitting a nuclear power plant, which then flooded the area and caused 3 meltdowns to occur. This ended up releasing a lot of radiation into the atmosphere, and around 150,000 people needed to be evacuated from the surrounding areas. Because of these disasters and the rise of other alternative energy sources, many now regard nuclear energy as too big a risk and would rather go without it. And yet, nuclear seems to be making a comeback. Recent analytics provide evidence in support of 2 pro-nuclear points. The first being the fact that nuclear energy is much more efficient at creating energy when compared to other sources like wind and solar.
Less than 0.5% of our electricity globally comes from solar, about 2% from wind, and the majority comes from nuclear and hydro. And he said, look, despite what you might think, according to the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, nuclear actually produces 4 times less carbon emissions than solar does.
And second is recent findings showing that radiation caused by nuclear accidents, such as Chernobyl, don't even compare in terms of death toll to the harm caused by air pollution globally.
The total amount of ionizing radiation we're exposed to from not just Chernobyl and Fukushima, but also all of the atomic bomb testing in the 60s and 70s totals just 0.3% of our exposures. Most of the radiation we're exposed to is just from the Earth or from the atmosphere or from the buildings around us.
So in the end, what side of the nuclear debate is right? Well, so far 10 of the current Democratic candidates have declared their position on nuclear energy. Those who at least somewhat support further developing nuclear energy include Cory Booker, Pete Buttigieg, John Delaney, Amy Klobuchar, Andrew Yang, Joe Biden, and Kamala Harris. As for those against nuclear, only Tulsi Gabbard, Bernie Sanders, and Marianne Williamson downright oppose the construction of any more nuclear power plants. Whatever the presidential outcome may turn out to be, personally, I hope that nuclear energy is not ignored. With climate change now having reached a point of no return, I believe that the only way to lessen its effects on this planet is for our leaders to finally devise a plan that will utilize our energy resources efficiently. And for that, I think nuclear may be our best bet. The amount of energy a nuclear power plant can produce just triumphs over any other energy source. So hopefully people will start to realize the benefits it can provide.